the high points were, I guess John Mayall was, you know, when I was first finding my feet as a blues guitar player.
You got me on my knees later. Took all my friends up for a mighty good time.
Eric Clapton publicly exposed his 12 favorite bands, and some of them are shockingly unexpected. From punk rebels to experimental legends, his picks reveal a side of Clapton you've never seen before. Stick around, because number 7 will flip everything you thought you knew about Slow Hand on its head. 1. The band. When Eric Clapton first heard music from Big Pink, he claims it changed everything. He was at a creative crossroads. Cream was peaking, but the endless blues rock improvisation felt stale. Then came the band, with harmonies drenched in American folklore and songs that felt ancient yet fresh. Clapton was stunned. He called their music humble, masterful, and deeply moving, and was so impacted that he actually quit Cream to pursue a sound more rooted in songcraft than solos. The band reminded him that restraint could be just as powerful as virtuosity. Their ability to blend rock, gospel, country, and soul in a seamless way deeply influenced his own shift toward more structured, song-based music like Layla and 461, Ocean Boulevard. Clapton was especially drawn to Robbie Robertson's playing, not for technical flash, but for emotional precision. It was like every note he played had a reason, he once said. In a world obsessed with flash, the band taught him the art of listening. That revelation sparked a turning point in his career. Clapton's admiration went so far that he even tried to join them, but they politely declined. Still, the lesson stuck. He learned that space between notes sometimes says more than 100 runs. 2. The Beatles. Though it seems obvious in hindsight, Clapton's admiration for the Beatles goes far deeper than mere respect for fellow rock legends. It's personal. His collaboration on George Harrison's While My Guitar Gently Weeps wasn't just a cameo. It was a merging of musical philosophies. Clapton brought his bluesy vulnerability into a song already laced with spiritual yearning, and the result was one of the most haunting guitar solos in Beatles history. But beyond that one moment, Clapton revered the Beatles' evolution. He often said that what impressed him most wasn't their fame, but their relentless innovation. From Rubber Soul to Abbey Road, they never stood still. Clapton saw them as the ultimate studio alchemists, musicians willing to destroy what worked yesterday in order to discover something new today. George Harrison, in particular, left a lasting impression on him, not just as a friend, but as an artist who pursued musical growth with quiet dignity. Clapton has often ranked Revolver and the White Album among his all-time favorites. Their ability to blend rock, Indian ragas, Baroque textures, and avant-garde experimentation expanded his sense of what was possible. 3. The Mothers of Invention. You wouldn't expect Eric Clapton, blues purist and melodic player, to hold Frank Zappa in high esteem, but that's the paradox. In a 1966 interview, Clapton surprised many by naming the Mothers of Invention as one of the most exciting American bands. He called Zappa's music intellectually dangerous and admired how they used absurdity and satire as musical tools. The Mothers challenged rock's ego, dismantling the seriousness that often surrounded virtuosity. And Clapton, who was being called God by graffiti artists in London at the time, found that refreshing. He said Zappa made him rethink the purpose of the guitar, not as a status symbol, but as a storytelling instrument. Clapton even noted how Zappa's compositional scope, spanning doo-wop, jazz, blues, and musique concrète, inspired him to embrace weirdness in his own projects. You can feel that influence in Clapton's detour with Blind Faith, or later experimental choices in No Reason to Cry. While he never went full avant-garde, Zappa gave him permission to break the rules occasionally. That's no small gift when you're hailed as the face of a genre. 4. The Rascals. Soulful, groovy, and woefully underrated. That's how Clapton once described the Rascals. While they may not appear on many top-tier lists today, this American blue-eyed soul group made a deep impression on him during the late 60s. Their blend of R&B and rock wasn't just catchy, it was drenched in feel. Clapton admired how the Rascals fused gospel-style organ with tight vocal harmonies and driving rhythms, producing tracks like Good Lovin' and Groovin' that felt simultaneously laid-back and full of energy. He would later cite them as one of the few bands whose feel rivaled that of the real soul acts coming out of Detroit or Memphis. What intrigued Clapton most was their authenticity. These weren't British guys mimicking American blues. They were Americans channeling their own rhythm and blues roots with style and honesty. Clapton believed that kind of groove couldn't be taught. It had to be lived. Their tight rhythm section and expressive vocals helped sharpen his own understanding of pocket and restraint. Years later, during his Journeyman and Pilgrim eras, you can feel that Rascal-style balance between smooth production and emotional delivery. They reminded him that groove was a form of truth. 5. Radiohead. It might shock some fans, but Clapton has praised Radiohead for pushing rock into cerebral territory he never dared explore. In the early 2000s, while promoting Reptile, Clapton mentioned listening to OK Computer and Kid, not to imitate, but to understand. What struck him most wasn't the electronic textures or cryptic lyrics. It was the emotion behind the abstraction. He admired how the band avoided every musical cliché and still made something beautiful. For a man who grew up on 12-bar blues, Radiohead's fractured song structures and icy ambience were like hearing a foreign language, and yet one that spoke to something universal. Tom York's ghostly vocals, Johnny Greenwood's chaotic guitar stabs, and the band's fearless use of silence impressed Clapton deeply. He saw in them a kind of modern blues, not in form, but in feeling. "There's pain in there," he once said, "even if it's processed through machines." In later albums like Me and Mr. Johnson, Clapton returned to stripped-down roots, but with a new kind of emotional minimalism, arguably influenced by Radiohead's ethos. Their music didn't teach him how to play differently, but how to feel differently. 6. The Allman Brothers Band. Few collaborations in Clapton's career have been as impactful as his bond with Duane Allman. When they teamed up to create Layla and other assorted love songs, it was more than a meeting of guitarists. It was a spiritual collision. Clapton has frequently cited the Allman Brothers Band as a group that understood the blues in a southern way that felt ancient. What impressed him most was the band's dual lead guitar attack. Duane and Dickie Betts weaving slide guitar with lyrical solos, not competing but complementing each other. Clapton admitted he was floored when he heard their live version of Whipping Post, calling it transcendental. Duane's playing in particular cut through Clapton's soul, which led to their fabled, almost telepathic chemistry during the Layla sessions. That collaboration reshaped how Clapton approached guitar interplay in future projects. Even decades later, he performed Allman Brothers covers in his sets as a nod to their influence. He credits them with showing him that blues could stretch into jazz, country, and psychedelic territory without losing its core. 7. Dire Straits. Eric Clapton doesn't throw around compliments easily, but when it comes to Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits, he's been effusive. He once described Knopfler's playing as flawless storytelling. One note says more than 10. Clapton was particularly moved by Knopfler's finger-picking technique, which added a vocal quality to every guitar line. What stood out most to him was Knopfler's ability to create drama without ever sounding flashy. Songs like Brothers in Arms and Telegraph Road didn't rely on speed. They relied on atmosphere, melody, and space. In a world of overplaying, Dire Straits gave Clapton a reminder. Subtlety is power. The two would later perform together several times, including a famous rendition of Sultans of Swing, where Clapton looked visibly awed by Knopfler's finesse. He said that Dire Straits had a cinematic quality that most rock bands lacked. Each track felt like a short film with mood, pacing, and climax. This emotional intelligence in the music struck a chord with Clapton, who began paring down his own solos in favor of more deliberate phrasing. 8. Green Day. Here's one that catches most fans off guard. Clapton once admitted he was listening to Green Day during the making of Reptile. Yes, the pop-punk trio known for teenage rebellion and two-minute anthems. But Clapton wasn't drawn to the angst, he was drawn to the energy. He respected how Green Day made concise, honest music without the fluff. Songs like Basket Case and When I Come Around cut straight to the core, which reminded him of early blues tunes that said a lot with very little. He even said Billy Joe Armstrong's songwriting had that three-chord magic that so many overthink. What really got him, though, was the discipline, the ability to make tight, punchy songs that still packed an emotional wallop. Green Day wasn't trying to reinvent music, they were trying to tell the truth fast. Clapton appreciated that. It reminded him of the urgency he once felt playing raw blues in smoky pubs. While you'd never confuse his sound with Green Day's, the punk ethos, get in, say something real, get out, left its imprint on how he viewed modern songwriting. 9. Massive Attack. When Eric Clapton ventured into the realm of ambient blues and understated production on albums like Pilgrim, the influence of Massive Attack lingered in the background like a ghost in the machine. While he's never formally collaborated with them, Clapton mentioned in interviews that the haunting atmosphere of Mezzanine left a deep impression. He described their sound as hypnotic tension, music that simmers rather than explodes. For a guitarist known for expression through tone, Massive Attack's minimalist layering and beat-driven emotion offered a different kind of lesson. Less can truly be more. The track, Teardrop, with its muted rhythms and spacious arrangement, was something Clapton reportedly admired for its sonic discipline. Their cinematic approach to sound design made him rethink how emotion could be conveyed in production, not just in solos. It's no coincidence that Pilgrim carried that same slow burn energy, heavy on texture and introspection. Clapton wasn't trying to mimic Massive Attack, but he understood their magic, how silence, shadow, and restraint could speak louder than a wall of notes. He once said their music felt like walking into a dream you weren't sure you wanted to leave. 10. The Subdudes. Among Clapton's lesser-known favorites is the Subdudes, a New Orleans-based group blending roots rock, blues, soul, and Cajun flair into a sound as warm as a southern night. Clapton discovered them in the late 90s and became a quiet champion of their music. What struck him was their rawness. No flashy production, no studio tricks, just honest musicianship steeped in groove. The Subdudes were known for using unconventional percussion instead of a traditional drum kit, which fascinated Clapton. He admired how they made simplicity feel complex, layering swampy rhythms with gospel harmonies and slide guitars in a way that felt both sacred and gritty. He once praised them for creating front porch music with cathedral depth. For Clapton, they were a reminder that music doesn't need bells and whistles to be profound. He incorporated a similar sense of intimacy into his Unplugged album, which brought acoustic blues to the mainstream in the early 90s. The Subdudes' influence lies not in the notes themselves, but in the humanity between them. 11. B.B. King and Band. Clapton didn't just admire B.B. King, he revered him. But it wasn't only the man, it was the entire ensemble that traveled with him. The band behind B.B. King was like a locomotive, tight, smooth, and unshakable. Clapton repeatedly pointed out how this group laid the groundwork for B.B.'s emotional vibrato to soar. When they finally collaborated for Riding with the King in 2000, it wasn't just a tribute, it was a musical reunion with a lifelong influence. Clapton described the sessions as a masterclass in restraint. What blew him away was how the band never overplayed. The horn section was crisp, the rhythm section locked in, and everyone left space for each phrase to breathe. That discipline rubbed off on Clapton, who by then had already learned that sometimes the best playing comes from what you don't play. Watching B.B. King trust his band so completely reshaped Clapton's leadership in his own ensembles. He no longer wanted sidemen, he wanted collaborators. As he put it, the band carried the soul, and B.B. simply lit it on fire. 12. Buddy Holly and the Crickets. It all began with Buddy Holly. Clapton has often said that the first record he ever bought was the Chirping Crickets, a pivotal moment in his life. At that time, Clapton was just a schoolboy in post-war England, and hearing Buddy Holly was like catching a signal from another planet. Holly's music was clean, catchy, and full of possibilities. More importantly, Holly wrote his own songs and played lead guitar, a trifecta that shaped Clapton's ambitions. The Crickets' arrangements were deceptively simple, built around tight rhythms and melodic hooks. Clapton internalized that formula and carried it into his own early work with the Yardbirds and Cream. Even years later, he'd still cite Buddy Holly's songwriting as the blueprint for pop rock perfection. What stuck with him most was Holly's economy. 3 chords, 1 hook, eternal impact. The Crickets weren't just a band, they were a model of independence. In many ways, they were rock's first DIY band, And Clapton never forgot that. He credited them with giving him permission to dream with a guitar in his hands. Across 5 decades, Eric Clapton's list of favorite bands reads less like a genre checklist and more like a spiritual journey, one that stretches from dusty Delta blues to ambient soundscapes and punk rebellion. These artists didn't just shape his sound, they sharpened his soul. From the roots of Buddy Holly to the cinematic tension of Massive Attack, Clapton didn't chase trends, he chased truth. And while critics debated his phases and fans worshipped his solos, Clapton kept returning to one simple question: does it move me? That's the lesson here. Whether you're a bedroom guitarist, a songwriter, or just someone with a playlist and a dream, don't follow what's loud. Follow what's honest.